I've never worked with the virtual production wall. And so I think myself and a lot of people are misinformed about how it actually is, right? I think you watch the behind the scenes of The Mandalorian and it looks like they've got him out in the desert with rocks and stuff. That's all a bit of a fake, isn't it? Isn't it actually quite basic lighting around him? Sort of a video game almost around him. But you think they've got him out there in a full, like a movie quality scene, but it's not. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. One of the big problems, as you know, with rasterization is you can't deal with the massive amounts of geometry like you can with ray trace. They came up with this brilliant hack that was called brick maps, which allowed you to sort of compress data into these little voxels that can be contained as you move around. Now, if you look at Wall-E, you know he stacks those little cubes?
Oh, wow. Are they brick maps?
Those are brick maps.
Oh, wow. That's genius.
I found out much later that I was one of the first people to actually buy V-Ray. And I didn't buy it for my own name,
okay.
But I bought it for Gensler, which is a big architecture company back in the time.
I sort of heard about you through Colin, who mentioned you're basically making really cutting edge rendering tools. I just thought it'd be lovely to chat to you about it.
Yeah, I mean, how familiar are you with Chaos and V-Ray?
So I pirated V-Ray when I was a student, and I subsequently bought it after that. So I've used it quite a lot throughout my time in 3D. It was always very reliable, is what I found. Of all of them, it always worked out of the box. Is how I found it.
Yeah. So that's great. That's great. I mean, I've been passionate about V-Ray since before it was a product, actually.
Okay, cool.
And so, honestly speaking, I didn't need to pirate it because the first time it came out, it was free because it was just Vlado who came up with this idea about a render. Vlado, if you don't know who Vlado is, he's the V in V-Ray.
Okay. So, right. Interesting.
And, he's my boss, actually.
Okay.
And he is one of the founders of Chaos. Him and Peter Meadev founded Chaos over 20 years ago. So I've been passionate about ray tracing for a very, very long time, and I knew that this was sort of something that was important with what was going on in the world of rendering and computer graphics. And the struggle that was happening, and this was very early 2000s. So I found out much later that I was one of the first people to actually buy V-Ray. And I didn't buy it for my own name,
okay.
But I bought it for Gensler, which is a big architecture company back at the time. And I've been passionate about ray tracing for a long time because I knew that we were trying to solve problems with something called rasterized rendering, which we're probably familiar with, for years. And this was not in the real-time rendering world. This was an offline rendering. And this was sort of a way to sort of fake lighting because ray tracing was, quote unquote, too expensive to do.
Okay.
Too long to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so but I knew that there was something special going on. And then when V-Ray came along, it was at the right time to introduce this new kind of rendering. Mm-hmm. Ray tracing that solved all of these problems that we were trying to do. We were faking things before. Right? We were faking how lighting worked. We were faking how light bounces. We were faking how light works and interacts with global illumination. We were doing things like ambient occlusion, which is not real lighting, to try to fake the look of global illumination, right? And so I knew, it was like, that's not right. And I knew that ray tracing, if you ray trace it, you're done. Okay. Let's just put it that way, right? And fully ray trace, not anything else, not this hybrid rendering where you do some rasterization and you add some ray tracing on top, right? And so that was sort of the mentality that happened. So in the early 2000s, that was this philosophy I was working with, and it evolved. And eventually, what was interesting is that the architecture world, the AEC world, was the first one to sort of embrace this, if it's ray traced, it's done mentality. The reason they did was they were trying to solve global illumination.
Okay.
Because global illumination is such a critical part to making architecture look correct, right? You need, especially interior scenes, right? You need to know how the light actually bounces around. And there were solutions before, but they were either extremely cumbersome or they weren't accurate, right? And they were looking at just solving it correctly the first time around. But in the film industry, they were doing way more complex stuff where the concept of actually ray tracing was cumbersome for them to do, and it was quote unquote too expensive because they had to render so many more frames than doing one still of a problem. So it became sort of this other way of looking at things. So by around 2006, everyone sort of were trying to hack all kinds of stuff to make it work, right? To make it look as good as possible and to overcome all the issues that were going on with rasterization. And so one of the great big renderers at the time that was like considered the gold standard of the film industry was RenderMan, right? RenderMan was very popular, but it was a rasterized solution. It had some ray tracing on top, like a lot of things did, but it was rasterizing a lot. And the pinnacle of what that was in terms of trying to make things look as good as possible without fully ray tracing came around the time of WALL-E. And I really, really loved sort of thinking about WALL-E because, first of all, it's a fantastic film. And by the way, I love RenderMan, right? RenderMan's a fantastic renderer, so I'm not disparaging it. But they were trying to solve problems that were going on in a very interesting way. And one of the big problems, as you know, with rasterization is you can't deal with the massive amounts of geometry like you can with ray tracing. You have to be able to create these different things. They came up with this brilliant hack that was called brick maps, which
I've heard of them. Okay, I'm a bit young, you see, so I've only ever been in the ray tracing game.
It was a brilliant hack. Called brick maps, which allowed you to sort of compress things of data into these little voxels that could be contained as you move around, and it really sort of allowed for these things. Now, if you look at WALL-E, you know he stacks those little cubes.
Oh wow, are they brick maps?
Those are brick maps.
Oh wow, that's genius.
So the concept of what they're trying to solve rendering became a theme of the movie, right? And in fact, it almost created the design of WALL-E himself, right? And it was kind of an interesting thing if you really think about it. So, but if you do full ray tracing, you don't need to do any of these things, right? You can just solve the problem completely, right? And so the reason I bring up that story is because we're there again now, right? But in the real-time rendering solutions, right? Okay.
That's very interesting.
The way that real-time renderers are trying to solve this problem by still staying a rasterized solution is they're creating all of these random weird things to hack things to make it look like what a ray tracer solves automatically, right? Nanite is brick maps. It's the same thing.
Interesting.
Lumen is a way to hack your way around global illumination, right? Right. So it's interesting. So it's all just history repeating itself. But if you do full ray tracing, you've solved the problem. You don't need any of that stuff. And this happened like around 2006, where they create like WALL-E was the pinnacle of like the hacked solution to do it. But eventually, the entire film industry started to just move away from rasterization completely. Even though RenderMan has come so advanced in a lot of stuff it did with rasterization and raised rendering, etc., so advanced, RenderMan was forced to abandon its entire render and rewrite the entire thing from scratch to be a full ray tracer, because that was basically like, once you've reached that ceiling, you can't do it anymore, right? It's like, all right, at this point, we either move to ray tracing or we're not going to advance anymore, right? And so that's basically what happened back then. And so we're kind of at that point today with real-time rendering. And that's kind of, sort of at the threshold of what I'm working on, really.
That's really interesting. So are there projects that have started to use this technique yet, or is it just coming out now?
So let's talk a little bit about where I am with full ray tracing and what that means in terms of the real-time world, right? So obviously, ray tracing is, like I said, a passionate thing I'm doing. And we started thinking about ray tracing in real-time solutions, from the chaos perspective, when we started to look at GPU rendering, right? Because there was a ceiling of what we could do with CPUs in terms of speed. And then when they started introducing, when they started thinking about more things that you could do with a GPU, specifically with things like CUDA, it started to open up the door in terms of us using that specific processor more efficiently to do ray tracing. And the reason that became more possible is because ray tracing is something, I don't want to get too technically in the weeds here, but ray tracing was basically a massively parallel process that GPUs were very well tuned for. And allowed us to basically just get this massive speed jump by switching architecture, right? And when we started thinking about that, that was really cool. And we started developing things that way. And we started seeing essentially what's very common for us to see is now with path tracing, right? But this is think back to 2008, right? And then that continued to develop as we went along. I actually worked on some projects where we really started to throw more GPUs at things, and we started to see things, grainy images happening in real time, right? But we, because of what we've been doing with GPUs for many years on the V-Ray side, we had a very, very close relationship with people at NVIDIA, and they continued to give us hardware and access to early drivers, et cetera, to try to develop things for full ray tracing. And then one thing that happened around 2018 is they were about to introduce a new GPU, which most of the users might remember, which was the 2080. Right?
Yeah, I remember that.
2080 is an important GPU, at least that class of GPU is an important one, because it was the first one to introduce something called the RT cores, which are the ray tracing cores that were involved in those GPUs. And when NVIDIA did that, they kind of gave us a card. It's like, what can you do with this? Can it work with V-Ray, right? And we were very curious about it. And yes, we definitely wanted to use the RT cores for V-Ray, and we do. But as we started to look at and explore what these things would do, we realized that there's an actual opportunity for us to redo our entire concept of what a ray tracer can be for real time. And we built a completely new renderer that was optimized and worked just for the optimization of those RT cores. And it was called Project Lavina, which Lavina is the Bulgarian word for avalanche. And so we introduced this idea of what this could be, and we built it, and we made a standalone application. And that Project Lavina eventually turned into Chaos Vantage, which is okay. So that's our real-time ray tracer, and it is not the same rate, like it's not the same code at all as V-Ray. However, it is based on the same math. Okay. So our ray tracing math is the same. So meaning we calculate the shaders the same way V-Ray does, but it is completely designed for a real-time experience, right? And real-time ray tracing. There is no rasterization that's being done with Vantage or at all, right? And when you do that, it's the same thing that we dealt with back in the day. If you do that, you don't need to create all these hacks. You don't need to do all these things, and you solve tons of problems. Very, very interesting way. And it became really cool. Like we were really thinking about Vantage in a lot of ways. Now, here's a good analogy that I was taught by actually someone at NVIDIA in terms of the differences of real-time, of rasterization and ray tracing. With rasterization, the scale or resolution of your image has less impact on your render times. Right? So the way he uses it is like pixels are free when you're rising. With the ray tracing, polygons are free.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Because the way that ray tracers think about space is how it shoots a ray through space, and it often has a ray tracing acceleration method that gets you to that polygon very efficiently without having to read any other polygons.
So why is it, even if I use like non real-time V-Ray with a ray tracer, it's still slower if I have a higher poly count than a low poly count? So how does
it doesn't slow it down as much as it normally would, right?
Okay.
Okay. So you can throw a ton of geometry at it and it doesn't impact it the same way that rasterization does. Of course, resolution does affect renders, in rasterization, but not as much, right?
Right. Okay.
So it sort of enables a lot of doors there. So, but the inverse is also true, right? So, meaning that polygons does affect rasterization.
Okay.
And pixels do affect ray tracing.
Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, and the reason pixels affect ray tracing is the more pixels you have, the more rays you have to shoot out there to get a clean image.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, all right, good. Yeah, following along. So,
that's good.
Kind of an interesting problem. So that means that we can do a really nice, cool ray trace image as long as the resolution is small, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay?
Makes sense.
And so we saw, and when the resolution gets bigger, the image is noisy, as you probably are aware of ray tracing, right?
Yeah.
So we solved this by doing, let's add denoisers to things, right? So we've added several kinds of denoisers, and they were okay for a long time until 2023. Am I still? Yeah, sorry. Until 2023, when NVIDIA introduced something very special that some people say, oh, that's cool, but for the ray tracing world was, especially for us, was revolutionary. It was called DLSS 3.5.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
When DLSS 3.5 came out, it included a special denoiser called ray reconstruction, which was specifically built around what ray tracers were trying to solve. And it was an absolutely revolutionary denoiser and upscaler for ray tracing that based on what we had been doing with Vantage, we were immediately able to implement and completely changed the way we thought about real-time ray tracing in terms of trying to accomplish high resolution images that are clean at a high frame rate. Like it was not really possible to do it at that level until that came along. And since then, it has continued to grow. DLSS 4 is even better in terms of what we've been trying to accomplish. Okay,
right.
And then when that happened, that opened up the door for us to think about where does real-time ray tracing fit in terms of everyone's workflow, right? Because the fact is, it's still an expensive thing to do because you need a big GPU to make it work, right?
Yeah.
You can't do it on a normal thing. So, but at the same time, it really sort of opened up the door to us in terms of professional workflows, specifically in filmmaking, right?
Yeah.
So I had been thinking about, through all this discussion about ray tracing, I've been thinking about virtual production for probably 10 years, right?
Okay.
And I wasn't necessarily, or probably more, but I wasn't necessarily thinking about it in the way that you think about virtual production for LED walls, but in terms of just what virtual production means. Back to let's say the Avatar days, where you basically have a virtual camera moving around and you're looking at a people acting, the motion capture going on there. And I actually worked on a short film with this guy named Kevin Margot back in 2013. Kevin now actually coincidentally works at NVIDIA, but we were thinking about that at that time, and it became a sort of a fascination of mine. Fast forward to around 2019, when game engines started to realize that they had a role to play, or that there was an opportunity for real-time rendering in filmmaking in interesting ways. And it basically, before that, the only real solution that people were doing for real-time was Motion Builder, and Motion Builder really was not a great real-time renderer. It's pretty bad.
I don't know Motion Builder.
So it was good. I mean, Motion Builder was built for mocap, right? It was really what it was for.
Oh, okay.
So, but it wasn't really thought of as a renderer. So game engines came along. It's like we've got a really good real-time renderer, and they do for video games, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So they started introducing their workflow into this area, and including introducing what they're doing in terms. The idea of virtual production came along, obviously, with the advent of things that companies like Magnopus did that end up becoming what ILM did. That ended up becoming, what's the film or the show I'm thinking about? Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why that name blank on me, but anyway, Mandalorian came along and everyone's like, aha, this is going to solve everything. And then the pandemic, of course, overpromised what everyone was going to do. But that sort of led people to think about virtual production again. And to me, I found this really fascinating because it was a solved problem in a lot of ways. People have been using that method of filmmaking for over 100 years. It was just called rear projection back in the day.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So
yeah.
The only thing that virtual production did here was it introduced people a new way of moving the camera, right? And by taking the camera that you're filming with and tracking its position and moving it and allowing the environment behind you to move in real time based on that experience, it changes the way that people think about what's possible with virtual production. And I thought that was a really cool thing to think about, but it was still the same problem. I was looking at this, I'm like, but you're still rasterizing.
Yeah, so I've never worked with the virtual production wall. And so I think myself and a lot of people are misinformed about how it actually is, right? I think you watch the behind the scenes of The Mandalorian and it looks like they've got him out in the desert with rocks and stuff. That's all a bit of a fake, isn't it? Isn't it actually quite basic lighting around him, basic sort of a video game almost around him? Yeah, but you think they've got him out there in a full, like a movie quality scene, but it's not. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So let's sort of explain that a little bit to you. So let's go back to Alfred Hitchcock back in the 1940s, right? You have Cary Grant driving a car, and he's not really driving a car, around the country. It's just a film that's playing behind him, and it matches the perspective of the camera. That's the key part of it, right? But it's literally a screen behind him, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so that's why it's called rear projection. But what started to get reinvented around the Mandalorian idea is that what if you could move the camera from what's going on, and the environment behind you, changes based on that camera. So the only way that's going to happen is, one, you got to track the position of the camera, and the environment that's behind you has to be rendered in real time to match whatever's going on. So really, it has to be a real-time rendering solution. It can't be something that's pre-canned or any, right? So, but the other thing that they did is that they introduced them, instead of using a screen projection, they used an LED wall. And the the reason they used an LED wall is a couple reasons. One is it's much brighter. So it can allow for to be able to get a better look in terms of lighting behind you. But also they could wrap it around you so that you could get the right reflections of lighting around you at the same time. And this sort of solved a lot of the, before you did it with a green screen, and and then you had to remove all the green spill, and you had to do all the stuff that did the compositing. And also the actors wouldn't know what's really going to be behind them. They couldn't see it. With this, they had a feel, they felt like they were in the environment. So that was really the motivation behind rear projection in that ways, or virtual production in that ways. So back in the Mandalorian days, how high quality was it around him? Was it a full 3D looking like? Yeah, no. These are full environments that were created this way, right?
Are they cinema quality, or are they like video game quality?
Well, they're always video game quality because they're game engines, right? So
yeah, that's
But that's the question is, like, okay, let me ask you this. What does video game quality mean? And is there a ceiling in terms of quality that a video game has? And maybe that's true. And in some arguments, I would say that's a true case. Video games have gotten to look really, really good. Now, the problem is, like I said, back in 2006, we reached a ceiling of how good rasterization is. We already know that we need to go to full ray tracing. So to me, it's as if, rasterization handed off the torch to full ray tracing, and we've abandoned full ray tracing. That's in the offline rendering world. And we're now at that same zone right now where we've reached as far as we can go with game engines in terms of, or rasterization in terms of what's going on, and move forward. Now, I still don't think that rasterization is going to go away for video games, because for several reasons. One is you can do them with you can get very high performance with less expensive video cards, right?
Ah, yeah, of course. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So you can get, and so therefore, most of these game engines, they make their money making video games, right? They don't make their money making movies that much. They make their money making video games.
Okay.
So they need to keep their performance in a good spot so that games can continue to be games and successful. And if you're, like my 15-year-old kid, he wants a high frame rate video game so he can do well in his video game.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case for the film industry. For the film industry, we need very high quality images that play at, let's say, around 24 to 30 frames a second. That's about as much as performance as we need, right?
Yeah.
So that's really where it comes down to. So for me, in terms of filmmaking, we've reached a threshold. We need to move to full ray tracing for us to do anything good in that side.
Right. Okay. So do you think there ever will be a game that uses this technology, like runs at 20 frames a second, but looks brilliant?
I mean, there should be, there will be at some point. And I think, but it's going to be for those who want that, right? It's not, if you're doing competitive stuff like, I don't know, like Fortnite or whatever, and you need to have that high frame rate, it's going to actually impede you to do that. But if you're playing a beautiful game, they need something to look great. They've done it for Cyberpunk. They've done some incredible ray tracing in that. It's great. Yeah. I've seen a version of full ray tracing done for Portal, right?
Oh, really? That's cool. Okay.
And if you think about Portal, you're not trying to solve a puzzle, so you can look beautiful. It doesn't have to be a high frame rate, right?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So what sort of doors is real-time ray tracing going to open for films? Because they're doing ray tracing slowly now. So now it's really fast. What does that give you?
That's an excellent question, because yes, quality is definitely something that comes up, right? So what this did, sort of to jump back to what we were doing, what this did is we already had Vantage. Now we had Vantage with full ray tracing and this very, very smart denoiser called ray reconstruction.
Yeah.
This opened up the door for us to think about what full ray tracing did for virtual production. And let's start with the LED wall situation, right? So we really started to think about this. So 2023, we started to develop something called Arena, which is essentially our workaround for, instead of using game engines to do virtual production with LED walls, we created our own solution that sort of bypassed the game engine, right?
Okay.
So the first thing that did was, by doing that, you don't need a game engine to do virtual production. And that is actually a big deal, because the entire industry was thought like, in order for me to do a movie, I have to learn how to use a game engine.
Yeah.
And that's really not necessarily true. You can, and maybe that's a good idea for you to do, but being forced to use a game engine just because that's the only way that people think you can do real-time rendering is not true, right?
Okay.
So we introduced a way to you to do real-time rendering without having to do a game engine. And based on the nature of the way that Vantage works and the way Arena works, is you can take your 3D application that you have, whatever it is, Max, Maya, Houdini, Blender, SketchUp, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And anything that uses render, and initially we did it so that anything that uses V-Ray inside those renders, you can export a VR scene file and put it on the wall. Now, the big news that's happening for us right now, so we are now introducing full USD and Material X support inside of Vantage and Arena.
Okay. So you can use anything, basically.
So you can use anything. Meaning, if you're in Houdini with Arnold, that supports USD and Material X, you can export that data, bring it into Vantage, and have a real-time ray tracing experience. You can also take that data and bring it into Arena and put it on an LED wall seamlessly, right?
Okay.
And for us, that is a game changer, because that means that anyone can use any pipeline that they want to use. They're not forced to use a game engine. They're not forced to do anything. And they are truly embracing the open source nature of what data should be, which is USD. By the way, we're a member of the Open Alliance of USD.
So what's this? I don't know what that is.
Well, it's basically people who are supporting the USD process and what USD is.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Okay.
So we are very much like, telling people, it's like, your pipeline, your choice. We're providing you with the ways to do it the way you want to do it, and you can do whatever you want to do. And the same thing, we've actually introduced V-Ray for Blender recently, and we're a part of the Blender Foundation as well. So it's the same thing. It's like, we want people to be able to do the tools that they want to use and put them up for real-time ray tracing in that way. So that's big. That's kind of the big deal for us in terms of where that's going.
Okay, so basically what this means is that you can make your whole scene for like high quality and then just put that on the wall, no problems, almost no problems, I assume. Like,
yes, that is the goal. But there's more than that.
Okay.
The next step is, because the problem is, if you did it with a game engine, you'd have to take the data that you had, you'd have to convert it to work for a game engine. You have to have an entire department called the virtual art department that takes the data and down-reses the polygons so that they work in real time, right? Okay. And then you put it on the wall. Once you've done that, you can't take that back into post-rendering, because you'd have to start all over again to do that. So you have another whole set of assets for post-production. For us, you use the same asset across everything.
Okay. Wow, that's very impressive.
Whatever goes on the wall is the same thing that goes into your post-production as well.
That's going to save a lot of time, a lot of effort then. Like,
a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money. If you think about what's going on, if you're making a big film right now, or even a small film, better yet, because a lot of people are making small films, is you have to build your assets 3 times. Once for previs, once for virtual production, and once for post-production.
Wow,
and for what we're building, we're saying just build one asset across the whole thing, make it as in whatever platform you want to make it, and move it across the entire process of the whole filmmaking process.
So I feel like, as a spectator of virtual production, I feel like it was really big at one point, like 2000, whenever The Mandalorian came out. It was a massive deal, and it kind of contracted after a while. And I wonder if that's because it was too complicated, or what happened there. Was it too stressful, too expensive?
Why did it contract? Well, the fact is, I think people got the pandemic didn't help, right? Everyone thought like, well, this is going to solve my I can't travel problem, right?
Because really? Really? Oh, that's very interesting. Okay.
So people there were people that were literally saying, "Can we just Mandalorian this movie?" Right? It was like ridiculous to think about it. Now, it doesn't solve everything, and you're trying to do it's not the right idea of what you're trying to solve. Also, there was a bunch of people that just built all these stages everywhere, and they didn't know how to do things. They had to hire all these game engine people. It was very, very complicated. Virtual art departments got very big and cumbersome. And so while it solved certain problems, it also was very expensive. And it wasn't necessarily very beneficial. So what we're trying to do is, we do think there's definite value in virtual production. We think this is a great idea, except it's not necessarily. We need to bring the cost down and the efficiency high, and make things accessible to a wider range of people. We don't just want, some big, Marvel type show to be the only people that take opportunity of this technology. So, so for us, we saw it as an opportunity to democratize virtual production and make it more affordable to people, and also just make it much simpler. So
do you think there's going to be a big resurgence in virtual production once people realize?
I believe that it is, and it's actually going to, because of that, it's going to start to take new forms that I think is really cool as well.
Okay.
So, like for example, I started reimagining. It's like, okay, let's even remove the LED wall. Let's take that away, right? Let's go back to just tracking a camera, right? And putting in a blue screen or a green screen behind me, right? So I started we started looking at doing real-time compositing with Arena, okay? So, and that's becoming more effective, right? And so someone like yourself, like a YouTuber, you can't afford a big LED wall behind you. And
I'd love one, but no. Yeah.
You don't have the power in your house or your apartment to do that, but you can put a green screen behind you and you can do stuff behind you, and enabling that sort of democratizes it even more. So I'm thinking a lot about like, how do we enable those things in different ways? And even if you want to use an LED wall, it might be beneficial for you to do a blue screen or a green screen to test things, as opposed to having to turn on an expensive LED wall every time you want to try something. Right.
Okay. So what do you mean when you say real-time compositing then? How do you mean that? So
real-time compositing. So this is basically a similar problem to the LED wall. Instead of having everything in camera, which is what that is called, in-camera VFX, where what's behind me is an LED wall that's showing the CG exactly. Instead, I'm going to use a blue screen or a green screen behind me, right? So that means that when I do that, I can then basically take the shot of me behind a blue screen, and I can say, key out the blue, and instead of blue, put in the CG that's rendering out of Vantage.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, right.
Okay. And then as I move my camera in real time, there's a tracker on the top that I can use. And I can use, for example, a Vive Mars or whatever. I could even use an iPad and use.
Yeah, that's pretty mad, actually. That's and
then I can just composite it all together, and then it all works as one seamless thing. Now, it's not necessarily going to be as good and beautiful as an LED wall, because I mentioned before, LED walls, you have the reflection of the light around you, and you don't have the green spill, et cetera, but you still have the benefit of seeing something in real time in camera.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
which is great, which is really great. So that's something else.
Yeah, because as like a small fish over here, I always find it really difficult if I want to do visual effects that I have to like get it off my camera, put it on the computer, check if I like it, do this and that, make sure I'm happy with it. Oh, I don't like it, I got to do it all over again. Whereas if I could just see it like that, that's a massive help. That's ridiculous. I never even thought of that. That's
yeah. And then when you move the whole, like, the best way to think of virtual production, most people think of virtual production, they think of LED wall, which is just one part of it. To me, the best definition of virtual production is when you have a physical camera, right, that you can move around in space, and you have a virtual camera that is doing the same thing that the virtual camera is doing. So that the virtual world and the physical world are doing the same thing at the same time. Another way that people think of that is the term they use is digital twins.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's another way to think about things. But for me, it's like creating a digital twin of your camera is the foundation of what virtual production is. And LED walls is one of the ways that you can do that, but you can also do it for full CG scenes like they do on Avatar, right? When James Cameron was moving around with his camera and filming the people that are in their mocap suits, he was looking at a monitor of them doing it in CG at the same time. So,
okay, well, that all sounds very interesting. And so, I think I've asked all my questions. That's really interesting. That sounds like a proper game-changing thing.
Yeah, it is. And so there's a couple other big things that we're doing at SIGGRAPH that are also going to be important. The other big word that's going to becoming everyone's talking about, and you're going to hear way more about it in the future, is Gaussian Splats. Have you heard of Gaussian Splats?
Yes, I've seen that popping up here and there. Yeah, okay. They're proper. They're very. It's almost like photogrammetry, but it looks good. Kind of like really.
You're on the right track, and you're certainly bringing up the right question.
Okay.
It is okay. So photogrammetry is still creates creates what you're looking at in polygons, right? So it takes a bunch of photographs of the things you're doing, and then it reconstructs a bunch of polygons to mimic what you're doing, and then projects the different images onto those polygons to create the different textures of what you're doing. It's still laborious, and it doesn't do everything that you necessarily need. But that's what photogrammetry is. What Gaussian splats are is essentially an evolution from the early light field days, which is, I'm not going to get it because it'll be way too long. But essentially, Gaussian splats are, instead of doing polygons, it's points in space. Okay, so it's a point cloud. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a bunch of points that it generates, but the difference is, instead of a point, the point cloud used to be 1 point, 1 color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But with Gaussian splats, it actually takes the point and it creates literally a splat, which goes black like this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a curve to it, which is a Gaussian curve, which is why it's called a Gaussian splat. Right.
Okay.
And that color fades over time like a splat, but it also changes color depending on what angle you're looking at it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to bring up this glass here. This glass changes color depending on if it's behind my face or behind this wall or whatever. The reflections on it change depending on what angle you're looking at. You see the reflections change on it. So the Gaussian splat takes that into account. It knows that depending on the viewing angle, it has a different color, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the other thing is, it is much, Gaussian splats are very easy to create compared to photogrammetry. And they can give you very realistic looking environments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're essentially 3D photographs that you can see from angle, right?
Okay,
that are correct, right?
Okay.
And so this sort of changed the world as people were thinking about, well, how do I scan an environment and put it in 3D? And Gaussian splats became a way more efficient way of doing that. And so that's the new hotness, right? Is Gaussian splats, and now everyone is interested in Gaussian splats and Gaussian splats this and Gaussian splats that. And again, Gaussian splats, the way that they were first introduced, they were rasterized, right? And you already saw that based on everything we just talked about. I was like, well, what if we ray trace them instead?
Okay. Yeah.
So as we started to ray trace these Gaussian splats, which is what we introduced in V-Ray about a year ago, V-Ray is offline rendering, as you might remember. We was starting to introduce the idea of, what if you put in a polygon in that and ray trace the environment correctly? So, as you probably used V-Ray before, you have, let's say, a car, right? Mm-hmm. And you use an HDR dome light to create the reflection of the environment in that car. That works great. Image-based lighting, dome lights look great. The problem with the dome light is that the distance is infinite.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
With Gaussian splats, we know how far the car is from that point in space, and therefore it is a more accurate reflection because it actually has distance. It is not infinite.
Oh, right? Wow. So it's almost like a 3D scene that's lightweight surrounding your object.
Exactly right.
That's very interesting. Okay.
So now we started thinking about ray trace. When we ray trace those Gaussian splats, it enables us to add elements to your world, to whatever your scan is, and then reflecting correctly. So that became a big deal for us for V-Ray. We now have transferred that over to Vantage, which now allows us to do this now in real-time ray tracing, which now enabled us to do it with Arena, which means that you can get your Gaussian splat in your virtual production scene seamlessly.
That's very interesting. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. My question is, with all of that is, so to make a Gaussian splat, it's similar to photogrammetry. You go around the camera and you take pictures, and it is.
There are many ways to create Gaussian splats these days. The most traditional way that people have is, going around taking pictures or taking a video and just walking around and then feeding that video into a system to generate the Gaussian splat. Okay, that is called a training. There is a training method to do that. Okay, because it uses AI tools to be able to generate the Gaussian splat. Okay.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was going to ask, how does it know? Because with the ray tracing, you need to feed in the properties of metal, glass.
Generating the Gaussian splat is separate. We are not generating Gaussian splats. We're reading the Gaussian splat, but we're not generating.
Okay.
So, but there are lots of people that generate, and there's lots of ways to generate, and there's lots of tools to generate them, which is great. because they've become very popular and big, there are now actual 3D scanners that are much more advanced than a camera.
Okay.
That allow you to get a very accurate and high quality Gaussian splat. They use LiDAR systems. They use different types of cameras, but essentially they can create very high quality Gaussian splats out there. So you're going to see much more use cases for Gaussian splats moving forward. So but we have the renderer that can read it and render it.
Okay, wow. And then put that onto a wall. So you have like depth in your wall almost in terms of how the light.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Wow. Okay, that's very interesting.
So the disadvantage, keep in mind that with a Gaussian splat, at least as of now, there's discussions later about how to solve this problem. But the thing is, it's fixed lighting. Whatever you captured on the day, that's the way the lighting is. You can't change it, right?
Okay.
With photogrammetry, you can add CG stuff and try to change the lighting, not with Gaussian splats.
Okay, is that because it's quite early days and it just needs to be broken apart?
Because the lighting is baked into the points, right? So, but people are starting to reimagine a splat or a Gaussian splat solution. To say, what if it was relightable? And I'll let the doctorates of computer science solve those problems.
Okay, so regarding Gaussian splats, I can really see it from a game perspective because you can go out and film an area and have like a completely photoreal looking area that works in real time. From a film perspective, what advantage do you get from Gaussian splats versus traditional polygons and photogrammetry and all that stuff?
It's fast.
Oh, okay. It's lightweight.
It's fast, and it's you can, and it's high quality too, right? There's certain things that photogrammetry can't do, especially with high density, small things, right? Like a tree. Doing a tree with a bunch of leaves on it, with Gaussian splats, it'll look flawless. With polygons, it'll take forever to make all those little polygon trees and leaves, right? And it will look terrible. It's just never going to look.
I've tried it. It doesn't work. Yeah.
No, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with hair, same thing with fuzzy little things, stuff like that.
Okay.
The Gaussian splats can solve a lot of problems in that way.
Okay, right. So this is like an AI tool that's coming in to enable artists to make art, kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's great. It's really great. It's just have to think differently about how it works.
Okay. Because typically AI gets a lot of bad reputation in visual effects, but this seems like one.
Well, I mean, yeah, but the fact is we didn't call it AI, but it's been around for 20 years.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah.
Right now, it just uses the term AI and everyone freaks out. But it's not. I mean, honestly, it's really just machine learning. What you're doing with the tool to train how to make a Gaussian splat, you're feeding it a bunch of images and says, based on these images, use your machine learning to generate a point cloud and give me the color of that as a splat down the line. And that's really what it's doing. It's not generating it's just making a Gaussian splat through the training system. So it's really the only way to do it.
Yeah, no, of course.
You can't manually do it without AI.
So the cutting edge is going to be real-time ray trace Gaussian splat. So you can have a scene that looks beautiful and you can render it in like a second, basically.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. That's that. And how do you think that's going to change filmmaking? What's the big film that's going to use it?
Honestly, it's just going to make it easier and faster for people to do things, right? For us, remember, again, I was telling you about like people like, oh my God, if I have to put a big environment on the wall, it's really expensive, right? And that shouldn't be the case. So imagine you're a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, and you're trying to make a film, and it involves creating a scene I'm going to say like the port of Monte Carlo. Right?
Yeah.
If you're going to shoot an entire film there, it's going to be very expensive. Right?
Yeah.
You got to shoot down the whole area and do everything. It's going to be very expensive. But what you can do is you can bring in a second unit person there. You can do some establishing shots. You can shoot some drone footage. You can do a camera panning across. Just get the environment the way you want to establish that you are here in Monte Carlo. And you do it, let's say at sunset, right? Magic hour. Right? You're doing a fancy romantic comedy or some kind, right? And so once you've done that and you've established where you are, you capture a Gaussian splat of the same environment. And then you have that data with you. You can go back to your stage in like Bucharest somewhere, for example, right? And you can take that exact environment at that exact point in time and put your actors right there on the set. You can have CG cars moving behind them so it keeps that lively effect. And they're ray tracing the sunset of Monte Carlo. And you can shoot all day for a week.
Yeah.
The same time of day.
Yeah.
So it's much cheaper. And it's a Gaussian splat as opposed to involving in a massive team to try to convert the data, make it work for game engines, do all the polygon changes, match the lighting. No, you've captured it at the same time of day. It looks great. So there you go.
Is the real-time tool using Gaussian splats, or can it work with polygons and Gaussian splats, but it's just even faster?
You can work with both at the same time.
That's very impressive. Okay.
Yeah. So we can do both at the same time, and they're fully ray traced both at the same time. So that's the idea.
Wow. I mean, that sounds like it's going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to me. This has been fascinating. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the first project going to use this properly and blow the doors open, you know. We've got
so what's interesting to us in this process is that we've been getting a lot of interest not from our usual places. We're not getting them from the visual effect people. We're getting them from filmmakers who are like,
that's cool.
Wait, now I can solve, like, I used to think of virtual production as a very expensive way of doing something. Now I'm looking at it as a way that is high quality and going to save me a ton of money. Right.
Okay, that's very cool.
So this is actually a completely different conversation. So filmmakers are very interested in this tool, and that's great. You know, and as you're probably aware, right now in Hollywood, there is a massive interest in low budget independent films.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Because and then this is enabling people to think about that. And the misnomer of high tech is that it's high cost.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, it used to be, right? But this is changed again.
Right? So we're looking at high tech as cost savings.
Okay, that's very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. Anything that enables indie filmmakers, because they seem to always make the cutting edge, interesting, unique stuff. You know what I mean? Then Hollywood follows through and makes the blockbuster version of it. So that's okay. That's very exciting to see.